and welcome to Bonus Action Heroes Read Reddit Stories. You can join in the live chat on Twitch or watch the less tangential edit here on YouTube. This episode we discuss a couple of stories from D&D newbies struggling to get into the roleplay. Let us know your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe. This first one is from RD&D, from the user Demon's Dragon, and the title is Help Us Get Out of the Cringe Zone. I have this problem to an extent. I'm working on improving myself, but I see some of my fellow players have this problem as well, sometimes to a larger extent. I am a fairly new D&D player. My first full campaign is Curse of Strahd, and I am playing with some friends. Our dungeon master is another friend who introduced us to the game. All involved are guys in their late teens/early 20s. My character already died in the Death Hut. I'm pretty sure he means Death House.
Perhaps it was smaller. They reduced it. Thought it would take too long, so they changed it to the Death Hut. You know, it happens.
Death Hut. And I love the way Reddit posters write. So parentheses, feels sad, man, close parentheses. Except it didn't. I know it should have, but well, here is the problem. I am having a very hard time getting out of my comfort zone and playing as someone other than myself. Voices are incredibly hard, and one big obstacle I did not think of was the cringe factor. Putting yourself out there can be difficult for some people, and role-playing as something other than insert generic fighter person who fights because fighting. Role-playing fighting is easy for us, we find it fun and like to act out what we do in them, but role-playing social encounters and emotional situations is just, we can't do it. There is some sort of block right there. All of us in the group feel it to some extent, and I know that while it might not be ruining the experience, it is detracting from it. My DM friend has directed us to Critical Role for some tips and suggestions, but those people are just out there incredibly good at what they do and impossible to match, you know? Any tips on how we can get rid of this mental block? I already know the feeling of cringe doesn't come from the situation, it comes from the person viewing it. I know it's a problem from our end, not the D&D material we are going through. That is the post.
Okay.
First thoughts?
Well, I think we've all felt that, right? I think we still have the cringe quite regularly, and I'm not going to lie. I often practice accents and voices offline, and as soon as we get on the stream, I can have a great voice, and the same generic one comes out. So, my first question would be: do you really care about the role playing and the emotional moments? Do you want that? Does your party want that? Because D&D to some people is a battle game, to other people it's a storytelling game. You know, there's no wrong way to play it as long as everyone around the table agrees to the way they want to play. So that would be my first challenge, but it sounds like this person wants to go for it.
It sounds like it. I mean, have they had a session zero? Have they communicated their expectations to each other? Because like I came into D&D from watching Critical Role, so that's what I thought D&D was. I wasn't aware that you could just play it more like a war game if you wanted to. So maybe you're right, and that is more what they need, or maybe the people in the group want different things.
You know, I started playing D&D when there was no, well, let's face it, there was no internet. So there was no Critical Role, there was no professional role players. When I first started, they were pretty much a war game, and you would play the character to a degree, but it was all pretty tame. Things have come on a long way, but I think comparing yourself to Critical Role and using Critical Role as an example is probably setting the bar way too high for you, and that's probably adding to the pressure of, because I get that, you know, we stream our games, but we're always upfront that these are real D&D games. We are not voice actors. We are not actors. I just think you just kind of need to work together. You need to feel like your group is supportive, that people are laughing with you, because sometimes the cringe can be brilliant entertainment, right?
Yeah. Oh, the accents are some of the best bits of our game, and I'm sorry, it's not because they're good.
Exactly. I always apologize for my accents, because if they sound like any real world ones, that's pure coincidence, and I'm very sorry. But, you know, if it's a group of people that you trust and you feel safe with, and let's face it, when we were teenagers, your sense of cringe is a lot higher. I think you are cringe sensitive in your younger years, and as you get older, you give less of a crap about that stuff. I see you've put in chat Bupedo. So Bupedo is an NPC from Out of the Abyss. You
I
were going to
remember.
marry him. So
Because he was so lovable. The more zany, I guess, the more they stick out in your mind, and it's not because Matt delivered an Oscar-winning performance.
no, far from it. Far from it. You know, these games are supposed to be fun, so go for it, have a bit of fun. I actually think the GM can do something here though as well. So it's not up to the GM to do everything, but the GM can lead by example. So I do stupid voices, and hopefully that makes the players feel safe. But the GM can also reward good role playing, an emotional moment or a silly moment, or just going for it with inspiration and things like that, because it sends the message to the players then that it's okay to do this. But not only is it okay, but when you do, it's awesome and everyone's having a good time. So I just think it's probably just worth having a chat with everybody and saying, does everyone want to do this? Can we find a way to get more of it in our game? Can we find a way to be comfortable? Can we be supportive of each other? Because if you've got that, the rest just slots into place.
There's some interesting comments which I can
Okay.
go through. So Adam M said, much the same as you, Critical Role is sort of an unrealistic template to model. You and your friends presumably aren't professional voice actors, and you probably don't have any notable theatre or improv experience. Of course, your game is going to look, sound, and feel different. The good news is role playing is not synonymous with acting. Doing voices is optional. Speaking as your character in the first person is optional. You can be a fantastic role player and meaningfully add to an emotional game narrative just by using your own voice and narrating your PC's actions in the third person.
I think that's spot on. I mean, most of my characters are just me in my voice. Really,
It's a lot easier to roleplay when I'm not thinking about doing an accent.
yeah, exactly. And as a GM in Out of the Abyss, there was so many NPCs at the start of that game. I think 10 or 12, all in a small confined space. I had to do something to differentiate them, and for the majority of them, that was stupid voices. So it doesn't have to be a full-on accent, or if anyone's been to Adventurers League in the last 5 years, there's a very Lord of the Rings, dwarves all sound like Gimli, terrible Scottish accents. You don't even have to go that far if you don't want. It can just be inflections. You could be slow and ponderous. You could be make yourself sound older, make yourself sound better, well spoken. All of that good stuff. So it doesn't have to be, like you say, an Oscar-winning performance. You just need to feel safe to go for it and just do something that makes that character feel different to yourself, and you're halfway there.
We have a comment from Tom. It took me a while to not feel awkward with the more sensitive and emotional RP, but I found that I was more comfortable with playing the game more silly/jokey character. So I just did that for a while and gently introduced the RP. I was less comfortable with until I was happier doing that. I guess what I am saying is to maybe stick to your comfort zone mostly and make the decision to leave it in small ways gradually until you are more comfortable.
That's spot on, Tom. Yeah, I think just gently push at those boundaries. Just step over the line occasionally and just push yourself a little bit, and gradually you'll find that line moves.
Yeah, some days you might be like, oh no, I'm coming back. I don't feel like that was didn't like it. And then some days you might start playing off someone else and really getting into it. There's another comment from someone that I really like, James Kinsella 23. You mentioned it being easy to roleplay combat with a generic fighter, but not social interactions. So don't make a generic fighter, give them a personality, and then act according to that personality, starting with how they fight. Are they the reckless barbarian? Then out of combat, they just want to get stuff done. They have no tact. The two-handed fighter, they're cocky, they like to brag, can't say no to a challenge. The
Yeah.
protection fighter, they want to help people to do the right thing, even at their own cost.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I think, I've played D&D a long time, and the fighter characters can be good when you're starting out because they are a little bit more straightforward to play, but they are a lot harder to come up with a backstory for. A druid is nature orientated, comes from the forest, maybe their land's being invaded. You can come up with, they don't like the cities, they don't like the towns, whereas a fighter is simple but So for me, you almost need a backstory for a fighter or a barbarian, because otherwise you'll get bored very quickly. I played a barbarian for how many years? 4 or 5 years. If it was purely about mechanics, I would have got sick and tired of him after sort of week 3, to be honest. So
I mean,
yeah, I agree.
that's a point as well. They don't talk about how much backstory they've come up with, and they probably have to an extent, but maybe they need to delve deeper into that. I don't know how long they've been playing, but like you and I, all of the guys in our party, we sometimes talk outside of the game about potential role play moments, and that helps us sort of prepare what we're going to talk about. It is improv. We're not giving each other scripts, but we feel a bit more prepared and we're not taken off guard. So having those conversations is important too, I think.
I think so. I think so. Yeah, you're not lining up exactly what's going to be said, but some people in our group like a bit of warning. So I think there was some things in one of our games where Hazel's and my characters kind of had a falling out. My character's not very bright. Going back to a fight with a bit of a story, he doesn't always say the right thing. So I warned Hazel and said, like, I'm going to talk to you about this, and I'm going to try and make an apology. So just that she was prepared. Whereas Tom, probably, I know I've spoken to Tom about similar things, and Tom's like, "Oh, just drop it on me. I'm happy to be surprised." So again, talk to your group, and you'll understand what people like. But just on backstories, there is a book that I've got, which you can pick it up for like £4 or £5 secondhand, called the RPG Character Backstory Guide, and it's a series of tables and sort of shortcuts to coming up with a backstory if you're not confident doing that. Likewise, it's totally okay to like watch a film or read a book and kind of base your character off someone. You don't have
When I
to. No one
create
has to know.
NPCs, I sometimes think of a celebrity or someone. That's what I'm picturing when I'm going to talk as them. I don't tell anyone that. I don't do an impression of them, but it's in my head, and I think it does have
Weirdly,
a
yeah, and weirdly
impact.
enough, this is a trick I use. I haven't got the cards here as GM. Is like, if, because I've Out of the Abyss probably got hundreds of NPCs in it, and I often prepare them in ahead of time. I don't want a huge page of stuff to read as a GM. I want literally 4 or 5 bullet points of who they are, and if I had a card, I'd show you, and it might say gnome, grey hair, beard, and then in the corner it'll sometimes say something like Clint Eastwood. Now, I cannot do a Clint Eastwood impression, but that doesn't matter. I just have to do what I think Clint Eastwood sounds like, or as close as I can get. And that's that character's voice. And if I come back to it 6 months down the road, my bad impression is not going to have changed. So that can be quite good if you're a GM.
It leads nicely to the last comment I've wanted to mention, which I enjoyed, which was from Fedic 101. Just a quick tip with the voices, which, as people have already said, aren't needed, but I find them fun. Try making the facial expressions of your character while you talk. Express with your face, and you find your voice will change with it a lot of the time. So when you said Clint Eastwood there, I don't think I know what he sounds like off the top of my head because I have no interest in cowboys. But it was that face that he's always squinting. And if you've got that face on while you talk, it doesn't matter. People will remember, oh, it's
Perfect.
that character.
Yeah, that's spot on. That is spot on. Can't argue with that. Yeah, whatever works for you works ultimately. But yeah, it doesn't have to be an accent or a voice. It can just be facial expressions. It can be, if you're in person, it can be body language. It can be anything. One of the games that I play once a month, GM is a very old school GM. He will often he gives a +1 bonus to anyone that wears cosplay things. So if you wear a hat, or we've got a halfling, he smokes a pipe. So there'll be a guy sat there with like a halfling wig and a pipe. He gets +1 to all his rolls whilst he's doing that. So that's just something that just pushes you into the role play for the sake of a mechanical bonus, but it really works. Yeah, and ultimately inspiration in D&D and other systems, bonus XP, whatever it may be, is a way that the GM can reward role play and say, I love that. Please do more of it. Here's a little reward.
We'll go with I'm new to D&D. Will things get better or am I overreacting? This is from
Mm,
user Eufren uh, from RD&D. I'm playing in my first campaign right now. It's a homebrew, and my DM is someone I've been friends with for a while. For context, we've had 3 sessions so far, including a session 0. There are 5
okay.
players in total, myself and 2 others. This will get confusing. Adam
Mhm,
and
mhm.
Matt are
Wow.
completely new to D&D, our only experience being Baldur's Gate 3. The other 2 players, Bryce and Peter, are well seasoned at this point. I've tried to read up on what not to do and kept in mind that BG3 was going to be a different experience. I wanted to avoid being the overzealous newbie with main character syndrome, so I made a character who is pretty quiet but will still interject from time to time to help circumvent that. I still want to roleplay, of course. The problem is, I feel like I can still hardly get a word in when we're not in combat or when the DM doesn't ask me what I want to do. In combat, I might say a sentence or two in character, then continue my action, but every time we're out of combat, just doing whatever, I feel like everyone just kind of starts talking over each other. We're also playing over Discord with cameras on, so not everyone sees when someone else is trying to speak up as easily as if we were in the same room. For
Mm,
example, we had our 3rd session a couple of days ago. Peter wasn't feeling well and disappeared off camera for a while. I would have been fine ending the session, but we just continued without him since we didn't really know what was happening. Bryce wasn't really paying attention because every time our DM asked him a question during combat, he usually had to repeat it or get Bryce's attention. So then we got to a point where we were talking to an NPC asking questions about our quest. I kind of got the vibe that Adam and Matt were just trying to solve the puzzle and weren't really role playing with the NPC. They were asking a lot of questions, so I sat back and waited until I had a chance to speak. Bryce started asking questions too, so after a few minutes, I was still waiting. During this, our DM had left his computer to check on Peter, their roommates, but DM still had his headset on to answer questions. After a few minutes, I finally had a moment to say what I wanted to say, but Bryce started talking over me instead, so I kind of just gave up. At that point, I was pretty out of it and really not having fun anymore. We ended up ending early, anyways, but I'm just not sure if this will get better or not because I haven't been really having fun. Should I be talking over other people to get a sentence in and try to be more forceful, or am I reading too far into it?
wow. My first reaction is not every group you play D&D with is going to be the right group for you.
Mm,
But I think ultimately this is another one that comes back to communication. That group need to talk and everyone needs to understand the expectations. And I do think this is a uniquely online problem.
mm-hmm,
We
mm-hmm,
have it with our group. If you play in person, I mean, again, there's a lot of neurodiverse folks in the D&D community, and some of us are better at reading body language than others. But even so, in person, you can look at each other. You know when someone is about to speak. It becomes a lot easier. Online, very, very different. So you do need to work together, be self-aware, and I find I do it with our group. You kind of have to be mindful. Whenever we're playing, I'm always thinking who's role playing at the moment, who's been left out for a little while, who hasn't perhaps had any input. And it's up to everybody, not just the GM, everybody to make sure that they give each other the opportunity to
mm,
join in.
mm.
I don't know what
I've
you
had
think.
this. I hope Jim doesn't mind me saying this. I'll ask him before I do the edit. But he's said he's had moments where he's felt a bit like that, and I made it a priority as a GM to if he went to say something and I noticed it, coming back round to him because it might not necessarily be appropriate right in the middle of that moment, or just going like, "Hey Jim, you look like you had something to say." Yeah, the GM is
Yeah.
spinning a lot of plates, and I have also 100% said that I can't notice everything all the time, but that is definitely one way of doing it, and it's not just the GM. If everyone is doing it, I think I've said it as Cass, as a character, to like, hey, you look like you were going to say something.
Yeah.
Because I've seen someone on screen that maybe someone else hasn't seen. And
Yeah.
that's fine, that's how it works. But I think it doesn't have to be that subtle as well. I think I've definitely in chats just put up my hand or messaged someone, maybe the DM, and said, "Hey, can I have a moment to do this? Or you can talk to another player and say, can we have a one-to-one RP moment? If it's worth having, obviously, not just take yourself away from the scene when it's to do with
Yeah.
everyone else. But if you have something that can develop your characters and it's easier for you, maybe that's one of the ways to start doing it. Just saying, hey, can I just have a
Yeah.
quick chat with you? There's loads of ways around this that isn't just talking over people. And
You should never have to talk over people.
yeah,
No, yeah, it's not that you're not being forceful enough. You shouldn't have, I mean, yeah, be forceful in character where it's appropriate, but you shouldn't have to be fighting to get a word in. It's just, again, I think Tom's put in chat, you need to have an honest chat with the other players. Try not to be confrontational with it, but explain that you're feeling like a wallflower and ask if they could try and bring your character into it more. And I think that's spot on, because ultimately, and Tom goes on to say, online you get lag, etc., and that does sometimes lead to unintentional cutting each other off. When I'm GMing, I've got two screens, I've got OBS here, and I've got Foundry there, and I've got cameras here. I'm spinning a lot of plates. I can't always spot who is speaking, but
it's
I
a
think
group responsibility. We're
the
looking after each
players,
other. We're facilitating each other's role play.
yeah. So if you have got cameras, that's where it's important to see if someone's trying to speak. But even so, yeah, you are going to occasionally talk over each other. It just happens with online play. It can't be helped. I think the important thing is that it doesn't turn into it kind of sounds in that group like you've got players that are very focused on certain things to the point where they're ignoring everything else, instead of it being a team effort and making sure everyone gets their chance to input, their chance to play. So it is a challenging one, but yeah, I would have a frank, open, non-confrontational conversation with them. And if things don't change, then maybe that's not the group for you. It's not, and that one group is not D&D. There, as we said earlier, there's so many ways to play D&D. There's so many different approaches, none of which are inherently wrong, but they may not be for you.
And don't let it sour your experience. It's like, I've said this before, it's like dating. You have to just keep trying until you find a group that fits, and then that you can communicate with, that you feel comfortable role playing with, and it just slots into place.
But yeah, you're right. It is like dating. You know, our group, I did some Adventurers League before I started running for the group prior to you. And then I had some good experiences and I had some awful experiences and a hell of a lot of Lord of the Rings Scottish accents at that Adventurers League. It was in a pub. It was great. Wonderful bunch of friendly people, but it was just a war game. There was no role play other than Scottish Lord of the Ring accents everywhere. There wasn't a lot of role play. It was not a prolonged campaign. It was just short stories for one night, short combats for one night. It didn't scratch the itch. But then I found you all, and it was an instant fit with most of the group. We still have differences. We still
believe in D&D soulmates.
yeah. I'm not saying everyone in our group is my RPG soulmate, but a good proportion of them are. Even in our group, we have certain players who have different approaches and philosophies, and we don't always align. We just have to talk about it. I think on that note, I will stop dragging it out.
Yeah.
And I will say bye-bye. I'll probably pop in Discord if anyone's still in there.
Night, guys.
Night.
Thanks for watching. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, Game Show Wave.
Game Show Wave.
Thanks for watching, and if you've enjoyed this, please don't forget to like and subscribe. You can also join the live chat on Twitch at Bonus Action Heroes. If you want to suggest Reddit stories to cover, please leave a comment below or join our Discord linked in the description.